Hello, this is Tonelli. Welcome back to One Chord a Week. Today's video is going to be short and simple, or at least simple. I do seem to have a hard time doing short, but it's a direct continuation of last week's video, so it's going to be extremely easy for you to understand. Let's check it out. The minor 13th chord is of course closely related to the minor 11th chord we saw last week. So here's a link. If you missed that video, you should definitely check this out. And we might also see it as a kind of a variation on the major 13th chord. And we did that just a couple of weeks ago. So again, here's a link. And if you get those those videos, if you understand them, then this one is going to be very simple. The sound is very Dorian oriented, so it will kind of skew you towards maybe jazz or a jazz interpretation of minor chords. But you can also, of course, find it in rock and funk. You can find it in pop music, and you can find it in classical music. And it's a big chord, and so sometimes you'll see it in a reduced manner. So we'll look at that in the three fingerings section of this video. But overall, it's one of those chords that you want to learn and you want to understand it completely, but then you might want to use it in sections, right? So you could have maybe the rhythm section plays just a simple minor chord, and then your melody will emphasize maybe those extensions, the 13th and the 9th, and or maybe you can just split it, between different instruments. On the guitar is actually an impossible chord to play because it's made up of 7 notes, as we'll see briefly, but that's no issue at all. We guitarists were full of resources. All right, so let's see how we build it. So technically speaking, this chord is made up of 7 notes, all the notes of a scale. And the scale is the Dorian scale, as we'll see later. But even though later on we'll play it omitting some notes, I will show you the formula for the full thing. Okay, so don't get scared. If it's 7 notes, it's fine. There's no issue at all. And of course, the starting point for this chord is a minor triad. And after that, the minor 7th. Okay, those are the building blocks for this chord. And let's begin with the minor 7th, which is root. In this case is C. We have a minor 3rd, which is E flat. We have a perfect 5th, which is G. And then the minor 7th, remember, is a whole step below the root. And so we have B flat. That's a starting point. Now, on top of this minor 7th chord, we have to add extensions. And technically speaking, again, on the minor 13th chord, we have all 3 extensions, the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th. And those notes are, for the 9th, we have a D, which is one whole step above the root. Then we have the perfect 4th, which is the 11th, which is F. And then we have the 13th, which is A, which is the same as a 6, or it's a major 6th. So overall, we have root C, E flat, which is the minor 3rd, perfect 5th G, minor 7th B flat, major 9th D, perfect 4th, which is the 11th F, and major 6th, which is the 13th A. It's a bunch of notes, but we'll see now how we can manage so many notes in one simple chord. So you can see that it's worth learning because this sound is really something else. And this chord, of course, has a very distinctive Dorian sound. The reason is that the 13th is a major 6th, and the only regular mode, diatonic mode that we know, which is a minor scale but has a major 6, is the Dorian scale. That's why this chord becomes very useful in jazz, where a lot of minor 7th chords, if not all of them, are considered to be Dorian, are sometimes considered to be the beginning of or part of a 2-5-1 progression. So without getting too specific, Dorian is a very often used mode of jazz, and so this chord works perfectly. So in the case of jazz, most likely we could say that you can take any minor chord and replace it, or a minor 7th chord, and replace it with this chord. If you're playing in a more diatonic or more tonality-based kind of music, like pop or even rock music, then you might want to be careful with this chord, because in a major scale, right, which has major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, those are the 7th chords of a major scale, you can only fit this chord on the 2nd degree, the Dorian degree. So in C major, you could only use this one in D minor. So when you find D minor, you can replace it with this. You couldn't replace it on the 3rd degree or the 6th degree because some of the notes of the chord in the extensions will not agree with that position. Okay, so if you're playing in, let's say, C major, you can only play this chord in D minor on the second degree. If you're playing in A major, you would use it in B minor. Okay, so it's important to understand that if this chord, has a lot of notes, and so it only fits in one position. Now, if you control chords, we already talked about this last week. If you know a lot about chords and a lot about scales, then you can say, well, what if I play this chord, but I drop one of the extensions? Then it will open it up to a new scale. That's fine, but that's really beyond the scope of this video. So for now, keep in mind that this is a 2 chord if you're playing in a diatonic context. If you're playing functionally, then whenever you want, you can use it. Just make sure that your melody and your scale will agree with it. Okay, the other thing that's fun about this chord is that it's made up of 7 notes, which means it's actually a scale played all at once, right? Because we have 7 notes and the scales are made up of 7 notes, and it's actually the Dorian scale again. So if you spread out the formula of the minor 13th chord, you get exactly the same as if you were playing the Dorian scale. All right, I'm going to show it to you actually really quickly. So the chord, as we saw in the formula section, is like this. We have C, E flat, G, B flat, D, F, A. The Dorian scale is the same notes in a different order. We play them from bottom to top. C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, C. Same notes. And that's why it's a chord that's very specific. It will require a certain scale, which is the Dorian scale. As far as sound goes, I really enjoy it. It does fluctuate a little bit depending on voicings because it's such a big chord. It fluctuates also a little bit depending on what notes you drop. And we should talk about that really quickly before we move on to the fingerings. I would say, as always, the 5th is the first to go because the 5th really doesn't add much. You will often find it in jazz without a root, but at least when I'm teaching them, I like to preserve the root because they kind of anchors everything and lets you know the sound of the chord compared to it, which is important. You see that it often drops the 11th. That's one of the notes that's almost often dropped. So of the 3 extensions, the 11th often goes. And you could actually even drop the 9th, okay? Because in this case, the important part of the minor 13th chord and its name is that it's a minor 7th chord with a 13th. Then it also allows the 9th and 11th, but they're not necessary. And so the really key notes here are the root. Even if you don't play it, somebody has to, right? So the root is important. The minor 3rd, the minor 7th, because it makes it a minor 7th chord, which is the basis for the minor 13th chord, and then the 13th. So the 5th, the 9th, and the 11th, you can do without. And so from 7 notes, if you drop those 3 notes, you get a 4-note chord, a lot easier to manage. But if you're learning from a book or a dictionary of chords, don't be concerned if you see a small fingering for this. You see a little tiny chord and you're like, how is it possible if it has 7 notes and I'm only playing 4 or 5? It's no problem at all. It's considered absolutely normal to drop certain notes from big chords. All right, so let me show you how to play it. This first position is a very common one and a good example of a small, tiny chord that doesn't seem to agree with such a big formula. But it's very common and it's played like this. We have the root on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. Then we have the B flat, which is our minor 7th, on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string. And then we play the minor 3rd, which is E flat, on the 4th fret of the 2nd string. And finally the 13th, or major 6, which is A, here on the 5th fret of the 1st. And as you can see, despite of having only 4 notes, it retains the color and the sound of the chord because it has the root, the minor 7th and the minor 3rd, and the 13th, the 4 necessary notes for this chord. All right, if you wanted to, you could add this F here, which is very easy to do because it's right between these 2 notes, and play like this. And this will be the sound of a minor 13th chord with the 11th also. So the 11th, you can lose it, but you certainly don't have to. You can still keep it and it sounds good. To me, it kind of distracts a bit from the 13th sound, but it's an option. So this is the first position. The second position is almost the same as the first one, but I really like the sound, so I'm going to show it to you. And it's like this. It's 3 again on the 5th string on the 3rd fret, which is C. Then we play the G here, which is the 5th, on the 5th fret of the 4th. Then we play the minor 7th again here on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string. And then again, just the same as before, E flat here and A here, minor 3rd and 6th. And it's very similar, but the 5th really rounds the sound, so check it out. I just find it a very pleasing sound, and you know, it's normal that big chords are pretty sparse on the fretboard. There's not like 1,000 positions for them, but I really enjoy this one, so I thought I'd share it. And for the 3rd position, let's move to the 8th fret, where we have this big shape here. We are using a bar, and this bar takes care of the following strings. On the 6th string, we have the C. On the 4th string, we have the B flat, which is the minor 7th. Below that, on the 3rd string, we have the E flat, which is the minor 3rd, and then the root again on the 1st string, which could be skipped if you wanted to. And then on the 10th fret, we have the G here on the 5th string, and our A, which is the 13th, on the 2nd string. And all together, it goes like this. And I really like that sound too. It's pretty big, but it's still manageable. And it's a great chord to jam on with, for example, the Dorian scale, which we'll look at right now. As you can imagine, we don't have that many options when it comes to scales with this chord, because it's actually a full scale in chord shape. So it's pretty much decided for us that the scale that works with this chord is Dorian. Now, before we continue with that, let me repeat that if you are a total master of chords and a total master of scales, then you can say, well, but if I play this chord without this extension or without that note, then that opens up a few possibilities for other scales. But for now, we have to stick to the fact that this chord has 7 notes in it, and those 7 notes correspond to an actual scale. If you know more than that, then fine, but I don't want to be responsible for you jamming with the wrong note over this chord. Besides, if you're not the one person playing the chords, you really don't know how everybody else is going to interpret that minor 13th chord. I might feel like playing it here, maybe I'll play it here, and now I have an 11th, and if you're playing a scale that has a strange 11th, then you're going to have a problem. All right, so for now, let's just stick to the actual scales that are permitted by the actual full chord. And the first one, of course, is Dorian, which is, as we said, a minor scale with a major 6, which is exactly the definition of the chord, which is a minor chord with a major 6. And so it will go something like this. You'll have this chord, and the sound of the mode, it's already within the chord. But you're kind of playing over it. Now, this to me is a bit too easy, right? I have a sound on the chord and I have the same sound on the scale. So one thing I like to do is to use another scale, which is, of course, the minor pentatonic scale. The minor pentatonic scale is built by taking a minor scale and losing the 2nd and the 6th. So because the 6th is missing, then I don't have an issue with it, because the minor scale would have the wrong 6, it would have a minor 6. But because the minor pentatonic scale loses the 6th, then it will fit over this chord. I simply don't have the 6th. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can leave the information of the 6th to the chord, so let the chord do the work, and your scale will not use the 6th. You see that? So I can get a very cool sound, but very rooted, because it's a common scale. It's based on the blues and rock. So it works very well to kind of bring down the minor 13th chord, which is such a complex and sophisticated chord. And I really like that contrast between the sophistication of the chord and the simplicity of the scale. And so you kind of just expose this sound with this one. Okay, and just to be clear, 100%, if you look at a minor pentatonic scale in C, you have these notes. You have C, E flat, so no D, which is the ninth of the chord, we don't use it. C, E flat, F, G, and then B flat. So the A, I'm not using it. So it doesn't matter if my original scale was the minor scale which had an A flat and the chord has a natural A. I'm not using a scale that has a 6, so it doesn't matter. This scale will fit over that chord. All right, so those are the two suggestions that I would have, and as always I suggest you record a loop of this chord and play on top of it with both of these scales and see what's up. And this is it for the minor 13th chord. I hope that you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, please maybe subscribe, like, comment, and all the good stuff that you know will help out the channel and will help out other people who then will be able to find this material online. And let me stress again how important it is to learn chords. You know, the benefits go well beyond actually learning chords, because you will learn scales, you learn sound, you learn intervals, you learn function, you learn all kinds of stuff by doing chords. So I suggest at least these 3 positions that I give you every week, you should really learn them. And if you go back through the whole series, we've looked at 20-some chords and there's still quite a few to go. So when you complete the series, you know, you'll have so much advantage over, you know, those who don't study chords. It's really amazing. So make sure you do. And that's it. I will see you next week, maybe for something a bit more complicated and but still fun. And thanks again for being here. I will see you then. Bye-bye.